Want to know something that I don't think is talked about enough when it comes to living abroad? How difficult it can be to readjust to life at home if and when you move back. I've been talking a lot lately about just how much we love coming home and how great it is to transition back to life in Atlanta after living abroad in Japan. However, what I haven't really shared about is how hard it can be to kind of get back into the swing of things here in America after spending the majority of the year living in another country. You would think that because it's our home that it would be seamless, but the truth of the matter is that reverse culture shock is a real thing, and it's something that I have definitely experienced this go round and that my kids have experienced as well. So immediately upon landing in Atlanta back from Japan, of course we made the trek from our gate to passport control, which I don't know why the walk is so long in Atlanta. I mean, on one hand it gives you a chance to kind of like stretch your legs, but on the other hand, it's really obnoxious to have to walk so far from your gate to passport control after a long haul international flight. So we finally make it to passport control. Of course, our kids are absolutely feral. I mean, they are exhausted. We've been traveling for 16 hours, and Harper and I have global entry, but Jackson and DJ do not have global entry. I'm actually in the process of getting Jackson's global entry. Literally, like, the meeting for his interview is next week. But the passport control line, you guys, is like wrapped around, like super, super long, like literally like a 45-minute plus wait from, the time we actually make it to passport control to the time that we're through that process and to baggage claim. So coming from Japan, where for families with small children, there's a separate line for just about everything, I am like immediately disgusted. I'm like, why is there not a line like for, families traveling with small children? Like, this is ridiculous. I look at DJ and I'm like, I miss Japan. Like, we're not in Kansas anymore, but really, like, we're not in Japan anymore because, of course, like, here in America, everybody gets in the same line, and that's just how it is. They don't care if you have small kids. They don't care if your kids are irritable and screaming. Like, you're gonna wait in the line with everyone else. And that's just like one example of how I was hit with that like reverse culture shock, like immediately, just going from a country where, like, if you're a mom or a parent with kids, like, people are going to make sure that you're taken care of. People are going to give up their seats for you. There's going to be special places for you and spaces for you to like care for your kids. There's going to be lines just for you. To America, where, sorry to say that's just not the case. That was like a big slap in the face for me, coming from that type of culture back into American culture. My kids' reaction to being home has been kind of similar, like they have been very, very happy to reconnect with their friends and see their family and, be around English speakers and just like have all the fun that comes along with being back home, back in our normal environment. However, they have definitely experienced some reverse culture shock too. So first, Harper. I think it was like her first or second day back at school here in America, and she got in the car, at pickup and told us that a girl in her class cut the line. And when I tell you guys that Harper was disgusted by this, like, she was super, super upset at the fact that this girl had cut the line. Like, I think that it's because, honestly, in Japan, people tend to be rule followers and they kind of do things by the book. And yes, kids will be kids, but like cutting the line at her school in Japan, like, was not really a thing. Like, the line leader was the line leader, and like everyone else lined up appropriately. And so Harper was extremely upset and bothered by the fact that this girl would cut the line and like that there weren't any real repercussions, that she didn't apologize, like all of this. And I think that's one example. And then another example, which was actually really cute and funny, is that I made steak for dinner a few weeks ago, and Harper and Jackson actually just started eating beef while we were in Japan. They didn't even eat beef before we got to Japan this basketball season. But because of that, like, we lived relatively close to Kobe. They really only had like Kobe beef, like really high quality beef. And Harper like was really quick to tell me, like, upon tasting the steak here, that it was disgusting. And she was like, "Mommy, I don't like American beef. Like, I only like the steak from Japan." And like, it was hilarious, but like, it's another example of like reverse culture shock. Like, she's used to her food tasting a certain way over there, and the fact that it doesn't taste quite the same over here was definitely a big deal for her, and something that I guess she's gonna have to like get used to, because sorry baby, mommy's probably not gonna buy you Kobe beef here in America. If you're gonna eat steak, you're gonna have to eat, the steak just like the rest of us. I might like splurge for some Whole Foods, like grass fed, but that's all you're getting. Jackson, on the other hand, his culture shock has been kind of different. Of course, he's only 15 months old, and so his culture shock is less about like the fact that we were in a different country, like in Japan, and the culture there, and more about the fact that he got really used to it just being me, DJ, Harper, and him. He really hasn't spent a lot of time in the care of other adults since he was, what, gosh, like 6 or 7 months old, really. And so coming here and being basically like thrust into different family members' arms has definitely been different for him. He's done fairly well, but I do definitely feel like he is pretty attached to me, pretty attached to his dad, pretty attached to his sister, and like when one of us isn't with him, he, has like a little bit of a hard time initially until he kind of warms up to the fact that, we're not there. Now, if we're there with him, he's fine. I've taken him and Harper to the kids area at the club that we go to, and if his sister is there, then, he's fine. Or if I leave home to go run an errand and leave him with his dad, and his Nana or his Mimi, he's fine. But when one of us aren't present, he does kind of have a hard time, just because he's so used to being around one of the three of us based on just how it was in Japan. Like, it was our little family unit all the time for the most part, besides when we had visitors, and that was it. And so that's what he's gotten used to, and so it's definitely an adjustment for him, just like getting used to being around other people and not necessarily it just being our little family unit all the time, and then also like being around people without it being our family unit. And so I'm curious to see how long it takes him to kind of get used to it. Unfortunately, I'm thinking that by the time he gets used to it, it'll be time for us to head overseas again. So we'll see what happens with that. So outside of, day one, landing in the airport and having kind of reverse culture shock slap me in the face, I've definitely dealt with it in other areas as well. Pretty much whenever I walk into a public bathroom here in America, to be honest, I'm like grossed out and want to make an immediate U-turn. The bathrooms in Japan definitely spoiled me. They are so clean, like usually spotless, and if they're not, like there are like cleaning products like built into the wall that you can use to like wipe up the bathroom, and everyone definitely prides themselves on like cleanliness and, taking care of public areas and everything being presentable. So that's definitely been something I've had to adjust to. And then just like the fact that America isn't as clean as Japan overall, and no offense, I'm obviously American, but we as Americans, I feel like, don't really value cleanliness as much. Over in Japan, people are still wearing masks. Like, it's not mandated anymore, but most people still do in crowds and in public spaces, and people are still very serious about washing their hands, as we should be here. But I got sick within 2 weeks of being home. I got like a pretty bad cold. I was congested and all that, and honestly, like, I felt like I'm just not used to these American germs anymore, and I'm just not used to the fact that, people here aren't wearing masks anymore, which, I mean, I'm thankful for in some ways, but it's just a change. And like my immune system, I feel like, was literally kind of culture shocked to just being back home and being back in an environment that doesn't really value cleanliness as much. And then on a more serious note, I've definitely noticed that my anxiety has heightened since we've been back home, just because it's not as safe here. in America as it is in Japan, and I definitely got spoiled by how safe it is in Japan and how I can like let my kids somewhat run free and not have to, worry about locking my car and stuff like that. Being here and basically being in a panic like when I'm putting the kids in their car seats and like looking over my shoulder to make sure that no one is going to come and like snatch us or snatch them or whatever, having to always keep them within arm's reach when we're in public, and having to remind Harper like, hey, you can't like run off how you could in Japan, like we're not there anymore. That's definitely been a change for me, and it's been something that's been kind of hard to cope with, honestly. Like there have been times where I've had like really intrusive and negative like thoughts about like things that could happen here, and I have to remind myself of everything that I learned, like in school. When it comes to managing anxiety, I have to do a lot of self-talk and honestly like a lot of prayer and have faith that like we are covered and protected. But it has been really hard to go from somewhere that is so safe to somewhere that is not always so safe, and I've had to relearn all of those kind of like safety protocols that we follow here in America just to make sure that our family is safe. On top of my heightened anxiety, something else that's kind of more serious that I've had to deal with is my social battery. So I'm a person that is what they call an introverted extrovert. I really love social time. I love hanging out with friends. However, I can get really drained really quickly, and I also enjoy like time to myself, and I'm definitely not ever like the loudest person in the room or the most outgoing person in the room. Like, if you know me, and I talk and I enjoy interactions with people, but I also can kind of be to myself and can be a little bit more reserved at times. And in Japan, I really, quite honestly, like don't really have a social life. Like I have my family, my husband. Sometimes I might have social interactions with another wife, like if there's another wife on the team or another wife that's coming to a game, but like I don't really have this big friend circle in Japan. Like I'm always thankful for when my friends did visit us in Japan, because I did get to have some social time, but that definitely wasn't often. And I feel like, quite honestly, I kind of got used to being more so to myself, and so coming back home and having all of these social opportunities has been a change for me, and it's something that I'm thankful for. Like I love spending time with my friends. I love the social time that I get to have here. It's something that I missed so much while we were away, and something that I was so looking forward to. But that also doesn't mean that it's not exhausting at times to go from basically having no social life to all of a sudden having like this packed social calendar, and all of a sudden having like random people that are communicating with me in English because they speak English here, unlike in Japan where like I'm not really talking to people when I'm out and about because like they don't speak English. For those of you who maybe hadn't heard the term social battery before, a social battery can basically be defined as how much energy someone has for socializing with others. We all have a different capacity, for socializing and for how much social time we need, how much social time we want, etc. And there are different things that can impact our social battery, such as, like our mental health, such as if you have social anxiety or not, things like that. And also whether you are introverted or extroverted definitely plays a role. That's something that we, learned about when I was in school for counseling, is, all of these different things that can kind of impact how much social time a person requires, and how they manage social situations, and how they cope with too much social time or too little social time. As an introverted extrovert myself, sometimes for me, like managing my social battery and finding a good balance can be tricky. And it has, like I said, especially been tricky for me since returning from Japan and trying to just readjust to having all these social opportunities that I really want to take advantage of. There's people that I want to see, there's things that I want to do, but at the end of the day, it's still draining. There are 3 things that I have been doing and being mindful of that have really been working for me in terms of just protecting my peace when it comes to my social life and being social with others. The first is to set realistic expectations of my social battery. I feel like sometimes I kind of like forget that I have this social battery that gets drained, and so I'm just trying to be more mindful of it and give myself grace, like remind myself like, okay, like you were abroad in a completely different country with no social life for 9 months and you've only been home for 1 month. So of course, like it's going to take some time for you to like find your footing, find your balance. So I'm giving myself grace and I'm being really mindful of the fact that like this is something that exists for me and something that I need to take into account when I'm like agreeing to things. Like honestly, sometimes I have to say no to things, just being mindful of the fact that like my social battery gets drained fairly easily these days. Another thing that's been working really well for me is building in breaks, like literally on my calendar. And we've been really busy, like I said, since we've been home, and I've been, having drinks with friends and all this stuff. However, what I've noticed is that I literally have to make sure that I also like leave some dead space. And for me, what's been working is like having a stay home day every week. Usually for me, that's Sundays. And so Sunday after church, like PSA, don't ask me to do anything or go anywhere. Like my husband knows, the kids know, we go to church, we come home, and then like mommy is home for the rest of the day. Like I don't go anywhere else. I don't do anything else. I don't plan anything socially. And yes, of course, I'm still like with my family and having to talk and interact with them because kids. But at the same time, like I'm able to just kind of unwind and recharge my battery for whatever I want to do the coming week. And the last thing that I've been doing is just being really picky with my social activities and recognizing that social activities are not one size fits all. Like there's a big difference for me between going out to a big group dinner with 7 people and having an intimate, dinner at home with me and my husband and another couple. And so I'm being picky when it comes to my social activities just to make sure that I'm not draining that battery completely and I have room for, more social interactions. There's so many things that I want to do this summer, so many people I want to see, and I definitely don't want this empty social battery to get in the way of all the fun things that are to come.